In a bustling Chicago restaurant, a man walks in, a Fortune 500 CEO dressed to command respect. But instead of a warm welcome, he's met with silence. 7 minutes pass as servers ignore him, choosing instead to fawn over a loud, arrogant stranger who waltzes in moments later. What happens next will expose the ugly truth about privilege, power, and prejudice in America, and leave you questioning how far we've really come. This is more than just his story. It's ours. If this resonates with you, please consider subscribing for thought-provoking stories that spark change. Let's start. Andre Phillips stepped into the restaurant, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tiled floor. He was dressed impeccably, tailored suit, crisp shirt, a watch that spoke of success without screaming it. But the moment he crossed the threshold, an invisible wall seemed to rise around him. The air felt heavier here, charged with something unspoken but undeniable. He straightened his posture, willing himself not to let the weight show. At the host, "Stand." Tina Marlowe stood flipping through reservation cards, her smile bright and practiced. Andre approached calmly, expecting the usual pleasantries. Instead, she glanced past him as though he weren't there. Her eyes locked onto someone behind him, a loud, brash man in a flashy suit who swaggered in like he owned the place. Derek. "Cole? Good evening." Tina's voice dripped sweetness as she greeted Derek. "Right this way, sir. Best seat by the window for you." She let him off with exaggerated enthusiasm, offering him a free drink on the house before disappearing. Into the dining room, Andre stood still watching the exchange. His jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his expression neutral. Empty tables dotted the space, yet no one acknowledged him. Minutes ticked by, painfully slow. 7 full minutes of standing alone while servers bustled around him, deliberately averting their gaze. Each second stretched longer than the last, pressing down on him like a hand on his chest. Finally, he cleared his throat and leaned toward Tina, who had returned to the host stand. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Could I get a table?" Tina barely looked up from her clipboard. "Oh, we're full right now, reservations only." Her tone was clipped, dismissive. Andre scanned the half-empty restaurant again, his lips parting slightly as if to argue. But then he stopped himself. There was no point in pushing back, not here, not now. Anger simmered beneath his composed exterior, but he refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing it boil over. Nearby, a family sat awkwardly witnessing the scene. A middle-aged couple exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. Their teenage son shifted uncomfortably in his seat, whispering to his father, "Why'd she treat him like that?" The father hesitated, looking away as though the question burned too deeply to answer. Silence hung between them, heavy with shared shame and resignation. A young busboy passing by paused near the host stand. He leaned closer to Tina, his voice low but urgent. "Hey, shouldn't we seat him? There are plenty of open tables." Tina waved him off without even looking at him. "Don't worry about it," she muttered under her breath. The busboy frowned but didn't press further, retreating quickly as though afraid of drawing attention to himself. Andre's decision came quietly. Without another word, he turned and began walking toward the exit. Just before stepping out, however, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. He slipped it onto the edge of the host stand where manager Rosa would find it later. On the card, bold letters spelled out his name. Andre Phillips, CEO. Beneath it, the logo of a Fortune 500 tech company gleamed faintly in the light. As Andre walked out, the young boy from earlier watched him go, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Dad," he whispered again, quieter this time, almost to himself. "Why'd they make him leave?" The father sighed heavily, shaking his head. Words failed him. All he could do was look down at his hands, clenched tightly around his napkin. It wasn't just guilt. It was the weight of knowing this wasn't new. This wasn't rare. It was a story repeated countless times across generations, in ways both subtle and glaring. Outside, Andre paused for a moment, taking a deep breath of cool evening air. The sting of humiliation lingered, but so did something else. a quiet determination. As he adjusted his tie and strode toward his car, he knew this wasn't the end. If anything, it was the beginning. Somewhere inside him, seeds of change were already sprouting, waiting for the right moment to grow. Andre stepped into the restaurant again, this time with Sandra by his side. She was poised and professional, her presence a quiet but powerful statement alongside his own. The two of them moved through the space with purpose, yet Tina greeted them with the same forced politeness as before. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and there was an unmistakable edge to her voice when she spoke. "Good evening," she said stiffly, barely meeting Andre's gaze. "Let me see what we can do." Andre didn't react outwardly, though he felt the familiar sting of dismissal prickling beneath his skin. As they waited, he overheard Tina whispering to another server nearby. "Why does someone like that keep showing up?" she muttered under her breath, shaking her head in clear irritation. The words hit him like a dull thud, a reminder that no matter how much power or wealth he possessed, some people would always see him first as an outsider. When Manager Rosa finally appeared, her apology sounded hollow, rehearsed. "I'm so sorry for any inconvenience," she said quickly, glancing around nervously as if afraid someone might overhear. But she made no move to address the root of the issue, instead retreating behind vague promises and empty gestures. It wasn't just indifference, it was complicity, a deliberate choice to avoid rocking the boat even at the expense of justice. In the background, unnoticed by most patrons, Marissa Lang sat at her table, phone discreetly propped up as she recorded snippets of the scene unfolding. Her brow furrowed slightly as she observed Tina's dismissive behavior and Andre's quiet composure. Something about the dynamic felt wrong and important. She pressed record again, capturing every detail without drawing attention to herself. Meanwhile, Andre endured the meal with growing frustration. His food arrived cold, served carelessly by a waiter who barely acknowledged him. Each interaction felt like another layer of disrespect being piled on top of the last. At one point, Derek's loud laugh cut through the room. He leaned back in his chair, smirking at Tina as he muttered something under his breath. Andre caught fragments of it, racial slurs disguised as jokes, punctuated by their shared laughter. "You've got to be kidding me," Derek said loudly. "Enough for others to hear. Can't believe they let just anyone in here now." His tone dripped with mockery, aimed squarely at Andre. Heads turned briefly, then looked away, unwilling to intervene. Andre clenched his jaw, focusing on maintaining his calm exterior despite the storm brewing inside him. That night, Marissa uploaded the footage online, adding a caption that struck a nerve. "America in 2025. A black CEO gets treated like trash, while a white scammer gets the royal treatment." Within hours, the video went viral. Screenshots from the clip circulated across social media, highlighting not only Derek's hateful comments, but also Tina's casual racism as she laughed along with him. The backlash was swift and severe. People demanded answers, calling out the restaurant's discriminatory practices and demanding accountability. News outlets picked up the story, revealing Derek's history of fraud targeting low-income families, many of whom were minorities. Suddenly, the man who had strutted into the restaurant with arrogance found himself exposed as a symbol of unchecked privilege and corruption. As the scandal grew, Andre watched the online reaction unfold from his office late at night. Comments poured in, ranging from outrage to messages of support. For every hateful comment accusing him of playing the race card, there were dozens more thanking him for standing firm against injustice. He scrolled slowly, absorbing it all, the anger, the pain, the hope. Being both the victim and the dewa catalyst for change weighed heavily on him, but he couldn't deny the significance of what was happening. By morning, the ripple effects had spread far beyond the restaurant. Protesters gathered outside its doors, holding signs that read, "Equity over entitlement," and "Justice served cold." Calls for reform echoed louder than ever, shining a harsh light on systemic inequities long ignored. Andre knew this. Moment wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong because of their skin color, their background, or their name. For Tina, the consequences were immediate and devastating. Restaurant staff whispered among themselves about the fallout, while management scrambled to distance themselves from the controversy. Meanwhile, Marissa's video continued to circulate, ensuring that the truth remained undeniable. Every frame captured not only individual prejudice, but also the broader systems that enabled it. As Andre reflected on everything that had transpired, he realized this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The first domino had fallen, exposing cracks in the foundation of systemic racism. What came next would depend on whether society chose to confront those cracks or continue pretending they didn't exist. Andre crossed the street with purpose, his steps measured and deliberate. Behind him trailed a small entourage, lawyers clutching briefcases, developers holding blueprints, and a city council representative whose presence alone signaled that something monumental was about to unfold. They entered the sleek boardroom, across from the restaurant, where polished glass walls reflected their determined expressions. Andre took his seat at the head of the long table, flanked by people who radiated authority. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a reckoning. When Tina arrived, summoned by Rosa under the guise of routine paperwork, her usual smug confidence faltered almost immediately. She walked in expecting nothing out of the ordinary, but the sight of Andre seated there stopped her cold. He wore a sharp suit that seemed tailored not just for style, but for impact. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the storm brewing in her eyes as recognition dawned on her face. "Wait," Tina stammered, her voice trembling. "You're here? What's going on?" Andre didn't rise or adjust his posture. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. "I'm buying this building," he said evenly, his tone leaving no room for doubt, including the restaurant. Tina blinked rapidly, struggling to process what she'd just heard. "Wait, you own this place now?" she asked again, her words stumbling over themselves. "I will," Andre replied firmly, "in 72 hours. The finality in his voice sent shockwaves through the room. Rosa stood frozen beside him, her lips parted as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Tina's knees wobbled slightly, and she reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. Just then, commotion erupted outside the boardroom. Through the window, they could see Derek being led away in handcuffs by none other than the same officer who had ignored Andre weeks earlier. Derek's loud protests filled the air as reporters snapped photos and bystanders whispered among themselves. It turned out his fraudulent schemes targeting low-income families, many of them minorities, had finally caught up with him. Justice had arrived hot and unrelenting, served directly to the man who once mocked Andre so brazenly. Back inside the boardroom, Judge Elaine Brooks entered quietly, carrying an air of quiet dignity. A black woman who had endured racism throughout her career, she carried herself with grace and strength. Without fanfare, she signed the final property acquisition documents, her pen moving steadily across the page. As she handed the papers to Andre, their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of resilience and triumph. Later that day, Andre returned to the restaurant, not as a patron, but as its new owner. Patrons watched in stunned silence as he addressed the staff gathered near the host stand. Tina stood among them, her face pale and drawn. Andre's gaze landed squarely on her. "You treated me like I didn't belong," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "But let me make one thing clear. Your actions here aren't just personal, they're systemic. And systems change when accountability steps in." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Tina, consider this your termination notice, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Andre wasn't finished. Turning to the busboy, the young man who had once tried to intervene on his behalf, he smiled warmly. "And you," he said, extending a hand, "have shown integrity and courage. Starting today, you're our manager in training. Your voice matters here, and it always will." For the rest of the staff, Andre offered severance packages, but not without making his expectations clear. if you were complicit in allowing discrimination to thrive here, know this comes with consequences, he said. But if you're ready to help build something better, Equity Kitchen is waiting for you. As word spread about the restaurant's transformation, the community responded with cautious optimism. Andre renamed it Equity Kitchen, vowing to create a space that celebrated diversity and uplifted underserved communities. Every corner of the establishment, from hiring practices to menu offerings, reflected his vision for inclusion and fairness. For Andre, this victory wasn't just personal, it was symbolic. It proved that true empowerment meant dismantling the very systems designed to keep people like him down. By reclaiming ownership, not just of the building, but of the narrative, he inspired others to believe in their own worth and potential. The legacy of his actions extended far beyond the walls of the restaurant. News outlets covered the story extensively, highlighting how one man's quiet defiance sparked widespread change. People began talking about equity in ways they hadn't before, questioning the status quo and demanding accountability. As Andre stood outside Equity Kitchen, on reopening day, watching patrons stream in with hope in their eyes, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. This wasn't the end of the fight. It was a new beginning. One act of courage had set off a ripple effect, proving that even the smallest seeds of resistance could grow into something transformative. 6 months had passed since the upheaval at the old restaurant, and Equity Kitchen stood proudly in its place, a vibrant hub of inclusivity and opportunity. The once sterile interior now buzzed with life, filled with diverse staff members greeting patrons warmly. Menus featured dishes inspired by cultures from around the world. Each played a celebration of heritage and community. Fair wages were posted, openly for all to see, and training programs ensured that everyone, regardless of background, had a chance to grow within the establishment. Andre walked through the space on reopening day, taking in the transformation. It wasn't just about the new name or decor. It was about creating something sustainable, something rooted in equity. He paused near the host stand where Tina had dismissed him so callously months ago. Now, a young black woman stood there, confident and composed, welcoming guests with genuine warmth. Andre smiled faintly, knowing this moment was more than symbolic. It was proof that change was possible. Meanwhile, Tina struggled to rebuild her life. Her attempts to find work elsewhere were met with rejection after rejection. The viral video had branded her as complicit in systemic discrimination. She spent hours scrolling through job listings, only to be ghosted time and again. Isolation crept in, along with regret. But it wasn't pity she felt most acutely. It was a shame. The kind that comes when you realize your actions have consequences far beyond what you intended. On a popular YouTube channel, Marissa Lang sat across from Andre, her camera rolling. So much has happened since that day, she began, leaning forward slightly. What do you want people to take away from everything? Andre took a deep breath before responding, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. I didn't want revenge, he said. I wanted change, but sometimes justice. Looks like both. His words resonated deeply, sparking conversations worldwide about accountability and the need for systemic reform. Viewers shared the clip across platforms, amplifying its message until it became a rallying cry for those fighting against inequality. A few days later, an envelope arrived at Andre's office. Inside was a handwritten letter from the young black man who had witnessed his humiliation at the original restaurant, the same boy who had asked his father, "Why'd she treat him like that?" The boy's words spilled out onto the page in careful script. Dear Mr. Phillips, thank you for not yelling that day. You changed how I see myself. Before, I thought being quiet meant being weak. But watching you stay calm made me realize strength doesn't always look loud. Thank you for showing me we don't have to accept disrespect to prove our worth. Andre read the letter twice, his throat tightening with each word. He folded it carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, vowing never to forget the impact of restraint. Staying composed hadn't been easy. There were moments when anger threatened to consume him. But he now understood how powerful silence could be. It forced others to confront their own biases, leaving no room for excuses. In a private meeting with Sandra, Andre revealed another layer of the story. The busboy, he explained, wasn't just any employee. He's my godson. Sandra raised an eyebrow, surprised. I placed him there deliberately, to observe, to report back. I needed first-hand evidence of what was happening inside those walls. Sandra nodded slowly, piecing it together. And he delivered. Yes, Andre replied. But more importantly, he reminded me why this fight matters. People like him deserve opportunities, not because they're owed them, but because they've earned them. The busboy turned manager in training thrived in his new role, proving himself capable and dedicated. Every shift brought fresh challenges, but also growth. For Andre, promoting him wasn't just about rewarding loyalty. It was about turning pain into purpose, showing others that even those overlooked by society could rise to lead with integrity. As Andre reflected on Tina's downfall, he felt no joy, only resolve. Her dismissal wasn't personal vengeance, but a necessary step toward dismantling a broken system. Privilege built on prejudice crumbled under scrutiny, and her fate served as a reminder that accountability was non-negotiable. The final narration came softly, almost as if whispered directly to the reader. She thought she was serving nobody. Turns out she was serving the man who'd soon own everything she thought gave her power. Those words lingered, encapsulating the journey from humiliation to empowerment. Readers grappled with raw emotions, rage at the injustices faced, sorrow for the scars left behind, and hope for a future where resilience triumphed over prejudice. Andre's journey offered a blueprint for change, demonstrating that quiet victories, rooted in authenticity and action, could spark lasting transformation. As Equity Kitchen thrived, it became more than a restaurant. It stood as a symbol of possibility, inspiring others to refuse inequality without a fight. For Andre, the victory wasn't just his own. It belonged to every person who dared to believe they deserved better, and to every generation yet to come. This story stays with you, doesn't it? The quiet moments of dignity, the weight of injustice, and the power of standing up for what's right. They remind us how much work still needs to be done. If this moves you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs to see it. Your voice matters too. Leave a comment about how this story made you feel or what it made you think about. Liking this video helps stories like this reach more people, and subscribing means you won't miss the next chapter in our journey toward understanding and change. Thank you for being here, for listening, for caring, and for believing in a better tomorrow.